just described, but that's not the same thing as to say that we haven't been through some very significant challenges over the last part. So we had COVID. It shrank the UK economy by 10% overnight, the greatest contraction in our economy since 1709 and the Great Frost. And what our Prime Minister, then Chancellor, did was to come forward with furlough and provide support for millions of families and millions of businesses and millions of livelihoods right up and down our country. And then we had another once-in-a-generation shock. We had the war between Russia. And that imported, through spiking in energy costs, massive inflation into countries right across the world, and we were no exception. And what we did was we stepped forward with billions of pounds worth of cost of living payments to support families up and down the country. My department, Work and Pensions, administered millions of those, 8 million to low-income households, 6 million to disabled people, 8 million to low-income pensioners. Why? Because we care about the most vulnerable in our society, and we are there to support those people. We have now, as a consequence, run up a debt of £400 billion doing that, just like other countries around the world, and yes, that has meant that taxes in the shorter term have had to rise. But now the economy is changing. It is turning. We have the joint fastest growth of any economy in the G7 in the first quarter of this year. Inflation has come down from over 11% to just 2%, so it's bang on target. We've had real wage growth for each of the last 11 months. We are at an inflection point, and that has allowed us to reduce taxes, and it will allow us to reduce them still further in the years ahead. And ladies and gentlemen, you have a binary choice in this election. We can either go forward, having overcome all these difficulties, made that progress, to a world in which we can get the cost of living pressures down further, or we go for a Labour Party that is going to ramp up taxes left, right and centre. It's in their manifesto, and in fact Ollie mentioned the highest tax burden in history. That's not quite true. It is very high. It's the highest since about the 1950s. Labour, by the Office of Budget Responsibility's own figures, independent, not mine, say their figures would, by the end of the Parliament, take us to the highest tax burden in our history, back to 1948 when those figures were first produced. So I ask you this question tonight. When Keir Starmer stands up and in answer to the question, what taxes are you going to put up, he gets all evasive. So think about it. If you drive a car, if you have a home, if you have a family, if you have a business, if you have a job, certainly if you have a pension, where these tax rises are going to fall. I've been your MP for 14 years. I lived in this town for over a decade. I stood up for the fire service, I stood up for the post office, I got me a library into the post office, turned it into a hub. I helped save those things because I care about our community. I hope that I continue to do so. Thank you.
And now I'd like to invite Mark Wooding to introduce himself.
My name is Mark Wooding, and I'm your Liberal Democrat candidate. I grew up in Devon, walked on Dartmoor, swam and sailed into the Sound, played rugby for my school. In my early teens, I joined the Plymouth Arts Centre, set up by the amazing Bernie Samuels. I remember his name 50 years later, which says a lot about the man. So he and the Arts Centre inspired in me a lifelong love of film. So I know why art centres are important for local communities. I went to university, studied biochemistry, and afterwards I went into marketing. I've always been intrigued by computers, and I started one of the UK's first internet businesses. Lately I have gone back to my first love, making films and producing TV series, and I've also produced the world's biggest fireworks competition. I'm married, I live in the constituency, I've been part of Central Devon for the last 23 years. Now Hustings are normally about you asking us questions, but I'm going to put a question to you. So who here remembers the London 2012 Olympics? A few hands went up. Wasn't that a great summer? I mean, our summer hopefully is shaping up to be like that. Didn't it feel great to be British? As a country, we were united. We were proud of our athletes, but we had praise for the athletes of other countries. We delivered an awesome Olympic Centre. And who can forget the opening ceremony? A celebration of the very best of British heritage and values. there seemed to be nothing we couldn't achieve as a nation. So look at where we are now, a country that is divided and struggling. How did that happen? Put simply, the personal ambitions of a few people at the top of the Conservative Party squandered the Olympic legacy. I believe we must, and we can as a country, rekindle that Olympic spirit. And for those of you who don't think that is possible, I ask this question. Why is it that we still win a disproportionate number of Olympic medals? And hopefully we will do again in Paris. It's because we invested. We invested in our sports facilities, we invested in our trainers, we invested in our athletes. And those 2012 performances by Mo Farah, Jessica Ennis and Chris Hoy, they continue to inspire young people today. We need more of that sort of inspiration and less of the partying during COVID lockdown. That Olympic spirit should guide us. We need to invest in our country. We need to inspire our people. And we need to believe that we can win a gold medal.
And now I'd like to ask Jill Westcott to introduce herself. Hello Ashburton. What a great turnout. Thank you for coming. I'm Jill, I'm standing for the Green Party. I've lived in Devon for 30 years plus. Much of it in Cheriton Bishop, the other side of the wall. I have a background in teaching and research. I have helped to grow and sell vegetables, make cheese, that kind of thing. I've been a parish councillor where I helped to start a community land trust to provide affordable housing in our village. That's for social rent. And I'm a mid-Devon councillor at the moment. So the reason why I'm standing is because I want a fairer society and one which can see its way into the future. Inequality's grown. I don't have to tell you about the increase in the need for food banks and the difficulties in finding housing. But also I'm concerned about fairness between generations. So on the whole, it's agreed that as a colonial power, it wasn't a good idea to go and occupy other people's land, take their resources as if they didn't need them or have a right to them, as if sometimes they didn't exist. So what are we doing to our younger generation today? Are we treating them and future generations in the same way? I would say that for a fair society, we need to be fair to those who are growing up, to those in the future, and we can't do that without a realistic response to the climate and ecological emergencies. There are many current issues and challenges that I'm sure you'll ask us about, but to me this is also one of the things that's vital. There's no section on climate change in the Green Party manifesto. It goes throughout. And I think we have to arrange our affairs as if we cared for our young people. And one of those things is a better democracy. For many of us have been voting for years not to find the changes that we want. Our democracy could have a fairer voting system, one in which every vote counts, in which we can say what we care about and which candidates we prefer, and our second choices would matter, and we could use more participative processes such as citizens' assemblies so that citizens can have a bigger role in policy making.
Thank you for your timekeeping. We do actually have a fifth and sixth candidate. Arthur Price is unfortunately not here. He will explain why, because we have a video lined up. He is also on Zoom, and so we'll be able to answer, we hope, if the technology doesn't let us down. Welcome, Arthur.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Marvellous. Hang on, I'm just going to mute my audio here so that I don't get any feedback. Right then. I'm Arthur Price. and I'm your independent candidate, and I'm from Lustley on the edge of Dartmoor. I was born in Lustley nearly 60 years ago. I know, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Anyway, I was born in a council house, and I now live in a small terraced house just 300 yards away from the house that I was born in, which I bought. It was my first house, and I bought it when I was 51 years old. Now, my family have lived in Lustley for generations. My great-grandfather walked to Lustley in 1915 from Barnstaple with all of his belongings beside him on a horse and cart. So we've been there for a long time. I've had 3 of my great-grandparents until I was well into my teens, and I was brought up being told their stories of hardship and struggle and survival. And if I learned anything as a child, it's that all the privileges that we have in our lives, we have had to fight for. And I am continuing that fight with my candidacy. Now, I've been asked several times why I've bothered to put down £500 that I know I won't get back for a deposit and to stand for election in a seat that I can't win. Well, let me tell you why. The party that I campaigned for at the last election is a party that I no longer recognise. Changed Labour, or as I like to call them, New Conservatives. There are thousands of people like me across this constituency, and there are millions across the UK who feel abandoned by the Labour Party. So by putting myself up for election, I'm giving myself the opportunity to vote with my conscience, and thousands of other people too. Now, nearly 1 in 5 children in our constituency live in poverty, and those are figures from the Department of Work and Pensions. And as you know, Mel Stride is the Secretary of State for the Department of Work and Pension, so he has a lot to answer for. I stand for massive investment in the National Health Service and the end of privatisation. I support investment in new green energy. And I support investment in public services and in education, and for public services and public utilities and for our travel networks to be brought back into public ownership where they belong. And on an international level, I stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza. I condemn the continuing genocide of over 15,000 innocent children. And I call for the incoming Labour government to recognize the state of Palestine in law. I stand for higher taxation on the super rich and to close loopholes on the super rich to make them pay their taxes in the first place. And I believe in support for workers and stronger trade unions. And I believe in the right to roam enshrined in law. Now, that's me, Arthur Price. I'll be back at the end of this evening with a 2-minute roundup. So thank you very much for your time.
There is one final candidate standing for election, Geoffrey Leeks for Reform UK. All candidates were invited this evening, but Geoffrey was unable to come. So we're going to start with the questions now. Now what I intend to do with the questions is to read them out because I've got the mic and we've got quite a crowded room. But I will tell you who asked them, and if they would like to give us a wave so we know where they are in the room. If we've got time, I might give them the right response. So the first question is from Amber MacDonald, who lives in Bobby Tracy. Okay, thank you. Hello, Amber. Hi. She asks, at nearly 50 years old, I've just had to go to the Bank of Mum to get emergency dental treatment. My son turns 18 in a year and may be forced to go to the Bank of Grandma. Please can candidates tell us what they intend to do to fix NHS dentistry locally as soon as possible? And it's similar to a second question we received, which was, why do you think that there's been a reduction in available NHS dentists in recent years, especially in central Devon area? And would you seek to reverse this decline? So I'm going to ask Ollie first of all, and then we'll walk along.
Great. Hello, Amber. It's shocking that the situation with dentistry across the region and across the country. There are probably places where you can get an NHS dentist, but you can't get them here. Maybe in some cities, maybe. And The underlying issue is the contract that NHS dentists have signed up to under this government. They're not working, and basically most dentists are opting out of the contracts and going private because that's the only way they can make their practice work. And that's the situation. Labour's got a plan, an emergency plan, to get 700,000 new dental appointments into the system immediately, and that's paid for in our manifesto. And that's really important because, unfortunately, Amber, that initial step might not help you because it's mainly aimed at kids. Because one of the biggest issues we've got is, when I was a kid, I went to the dentist quite regularly, and I'd go and it was a dentist. Lots of kids can't do that right now, and that is an absolute travesty. And people, you just want braces. I think it's something like 70%. I've probably got the figure slightly wrong. 70% of kids going into accident and emergency and for emergency care is often a dental issue because they're not getting the dental care that you expect kids to get. So we're aware of that. The contract is the underlying problem. We need more funding fundamentally in the long term, and we've got to grow the economy. We'll come to talk about the economy in a bit. We need to grow the economy. We need to get more funding into all of our public services because they've been broken over the last 14 years, and that's going to be, I think, a running theme of this evening. But hopefully the initial focus on this suggests that we know the problem. We know the contracts are a problem. We know we need more appointments right now, and we're going to get them into the system if you get a Labour government after the 4th of July.
Mel, can I ask you next?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, there is a problem, absolutely. It is patchy. There are areas, as I think Ollie was suggesting, where there are not problems with dentistry, but there are definitely areas that are. Many of them in coastal parts of the country and in highly rural parts of the country. The approach that we are taking is called our Dental Recovery Plan. One of the important things with the contract is to have a dental premium, so to encourage dentists to take on new patients in the areas where there are those particular shortages. We are also, and have started already in Cornwall, and it'll be spread nationwide, rolling out mobile dental surgeries to some of these areas so that we get into those harder to reach places. It's very important that we do work in schools, so we have a program called SMILE, which is all about teaching children better oral dental hygiene, which is really important, because if you can stop the problems in the first place, you don't have the demand that maybe you can't satisfy if you have a shortage of resource. But underpinning it all is something else that Ollie did mention, which is getting the right level of resources in there, and that's why we're within our plan have a huge investment lined up for additional dentists to provide those services within the system. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to reply next. I gather from those who are looking after Ukrainian refugees in North Devon that some of them are flying back home to get their dentistry, and they're taking their UK hosts with them, their English hosts, I should say. It must be better than flying into a war zone to get your dentistry. So, I totally agree that new contracts are needed for NHS dentists to give them the possibility of running a service that is free at the point of use. And Greens have made our budget, I'll tell you more about it later, £3 billion for dentistry. And elected Greens would campaign for hubs to provide dental nursing care for all children and people on low income, which would include preventive care. Thank you.
And Mark, please.
Thank you. Well, those of you who've seen my photograph on some of my leaflets will know I don't have the best teeth in the world. Now that's more to do, I think, with the fear of the dentist than the cost, but it's easy to rationalise not spending the money because of the fear. So, Amber, I sympathise. 3 months ago I broke a back tooth. That temporary filling was £120. And I was told by the dentist if I had to have it fixed properly, it would be £800. So I did ask the question, how long will temporary filling last? And and they said, well, perhaps 5 years. So, hey, I'm going to live with that temporary filling for 5 years because £800 is £800. I grew up at a time when dental care was free. I'm not sure it's done as much for me as it might have done, but it's a shame that it is no longer free. So Ed Davey, our leader, has very much put health and care at the centre of our manifesto. We're pledging to spend 8.2 billion extra on the health and social care system, and some of that will go into dentistry. The Liberal Democrats are giving a guarantee that children and those who need urgent or emergency care will be able to see an NHS dentist. We will do that by reforming the NHS dental contract so that dentists actually can make a living from it. And we will work hard to end the dental deserts that do exist in many places, and especially here in Devon and central Devon.
Thank you. And if technology allows, Arthur on Zoom might be able to reply. Arthur, I know you have the disadvantage of not being able to see the timekeeper. I don't know whether Andy can hit the raise hand when it's time to stop.
Okay.
He thinks he'll do that. Great. Thanks, Andy.
Okay, thanks. I'm sure I'll get this wrapped up in 2 minutes. It'll come as no surprise to anyone that knows me that I go to the dentist quite a lot. And my dentist in Chagford is absolutely fantastic, but it does cost. And that standard of treatment should be free for everyone. It should be available for everyone. I'm in America at the moment, where English people have a reputation for having really bad teeth. You can be recognized by your teeth in America. And the whole issue around private healthcare, including dentistry, is something that is laid very raw here. Last year, when I was in America, I had to have root canal surgery, emergency surgery. I went to a dentist. They dug around in my mouth. They took 28 x-rays. I'm not sure if that was, but of course, you know, they can charge more for that. And I was told, yeah, you need root canal surgery. You need a bridge fitted for your missing teeth. You need all of your wisdom teeth out. We're going to do it all today, and it's going to cost you £8 grand. Now, I've got travel insurance, and eventually I just went for the root canal that I went in there for. But it's because it's all based on making a profit over here that they threw that huge bill at me. And that's what we are heading towards in the UK. That's a heads up on what we're heading towards across our health services in the UK. All healthcare, physical health, dental health, and mental health should be funded by the state, for the NHS.
Thank you. Now we have question 2. Now I have chosen questions on their brevity, but also some of the clever ones on the expressions that are a bit longer. So this one is from Mark Spry, from Ashburton. Do we have Mark in the audience? A representative on Mark's behalf. Very simply, what is your policy on food production and supply in the UK? It relates to a later question that was submitted in the afternoon. I have heard a number of local farmers selling up because their businesses are no longer worthwhile. Farming policy change since Brexit. Farming policy change since Brexit had also been very slow and not provided farmers with the clarity that they need to run the businesses. How is your party going to address the challenges farmers are facing? And I'm going to work starting with Mel along this way now.
Okay, so farming, agriculture is absolutely core to central Devon. It's the source of the river. It's where the land gets cultivated, it's where the food gets produced, it's where jobs get created, that feeds into the distribution business. So Gregory's in North Taunton that moves a lot of the stuff around, and it moves into the processing, such as the creamery at Crediton and Torvale at North Taunton, and it's absolutely central to everything that happens in this seat, which is why over the years I spent a lot of time with farmers. The important things are firstly food security. So of all the food that we could produce, We produce about 73% of it. Of all the food that we actually consume, i.e. we can't produce all of it because it includes pineapples and things like that, we produce about 63%. And we need to get those figures up. We need higher food security. So we are setting targets for food security. I attended a Farm to Fork Summit at 10 Downing Street about 3 months ago, where we went through this with all the farmers and launched that important initiative. The second thing we need to do is support farmers. So we've come off the Common Agricultural Policy into new schemes that we've had now that we've left the European Union, but we need to fund them properly. And this is where there is a clear dividing line between myself and Ollie. In our manifesto, we will provide an inflationary uplift to those payments worth £1 billion over the next 5 years to support our farmers. The Labour Party have not committed to doing that. The second thing I would mention is bovine TB, which is an absolute scourge of farming in this part of the world, and right up the west coast of England. We have started to get on top of that at great cost, and we've done it through a combination largely of culling. The Labour Party believe that to be totally ineffective, and to whoever was asking the question, I have great fears that under the Labour government we're going to go way back to where we were before, with rampant TB in our herds, and I don't want to see that happening. So I believe that we are the party of farming. Thank you.
Thank you. There are some things that I agree with, I appreciate about what Mel said. Don't fall off your chair. Absolutely, that farmers need support, and I would say support for planet-friendly farming, for nature-friendly farming. So the basic payment scheme is being withdrawn, but the ELMS, the Environmental Land Management Scheme, is far less and not adequate to give farmers an incentive or a decent return for farming in ways which respect nature, which allow, for example, field borders, wetland, and so forth. So the Green Party would double and on the way to triple the amount of money available for nature-friendly and planet-friendly farming. We would argue that the returns should be greater for those who minimise the use of pesticides, which are so devastating for some of our pollinators and other wildlife. But there's also an issue about the cheap food policy, which has pertained for decades, which is that farmers don't get a fair price for their produce very often, and it's not good for consumers either. We want quality food produced to high environmental and welfare standards. We don't want poverty to be treated by cheap junk food. That has to be dealt with differently. And on its own merits. And farmers don't need to be undermined by trade deals which allow produce produced to inferior standards to good. So we do need to provide for food security. I would prefer to say food sovereignty, that we have control over our production, and there is more room for new growers to come in and to find possibilities for acquiring land to do more intensive horticulture, and for county farms to be retained as starter farms.
Thank you. So Mark's question, great name that by the way. So Mark's question started by asking about food. And we would introduce, the Democrats would introduce a healthy food policy which sets out to improve the nutrition in our country, which is not good. It would seek to deal with the highly processed foods that many people who are on low incomes buy, and which cause a lot of health problems. So that's the approach on food. We want a healthy food policy. We would encourage the public sector, for example, to source 60% of their food locally. So we would try and sustain our own food production sector. Now, in terms of farming, I believe that the Liberal Democrats have the most comprehensive of the policies that are being presented to the public. We have 4 pages of proposals developed with farmers, for farmers. Contrast that with the 90 words in the Labour Party manifesto. So here are 4 of the things that we would do for the farming community. we would put an extra £1 billion into the support payment scheme, that's called ELMS. That would be an extra £1 billion each year, taking it from 2.3 to 3.3 billion pounds. We would renegotiate the Australian and New Zealand trade deals, which are undercutting our farmers, and we would not enter into new trade deals where producers who have lower production standards than we do, who have lower welfare standards than we do, are allowed to import into our market. We would also seek to strike better deals with our European partners on veterinary standards, but also on food standards. We would guarantee our farming sector, which is in severe crisis at the moment.
If we can go now to the Zoom link with Arthur.
Yeah, I would take issue with Mel Stride's claim that the Tories are the party of the farmers. Mel Stride voted against enshrining the UK's food and farming standards, making them subject to any trade deals they might strike with the likes of the USA. Now, there are 32 Tory MPs in Devon and Cornwall and Dorset and Somerset, and only 2 of them voted to keep our food standards and to save our farmers from being undermined by cheap and poorly produced imports. So I agree with the Green Party on this policy wholeheartedly. I support local food, bought locally, transported locally, and purchased locally. The food standards since we left the European Union, we are now subject to possibly doing trade deals with America. And we only have to adhere to their food standards, which means things like chlorinated chicken, for example, and meat full of antibiotics and growth hormones. It's occasionally in a restaurant window in America, you see a sign that says all of our meat is antibiotic free. And the first time I saw it, I thought, what? We never have that in the UK, but it's coming. And also the air miles that are involved in transporting that food and the processing that has to take place in order to preserve that food over time is ridiculous. And I will end with one thought for the day on this. In our current climate of poverty in the UK, if you see somebody stealing food, you didn't.
So yeah, the 90 words in the Labour Party manifesto are very good words. It's 87 now. Okay. I think we all agree that we need greater food security and a more circular economy so that we reduce food miles and produce more food locally. The problem is that that's not what's been happening. So the trade deals that have been referred to are literally bringing meat from Australia and New Zealand, which is, not only undercutting our own farmers, but is also increasing food miles, increasing carbon, and reducing our food security. So in the last few years, the Conservatives have been making deals that have been literally reducing our food security. The other big factor that we've got to talk about, I think, is our relationship with the European Union. So, 2 things. Firstly, obviously, we have come out of CAP, as has been alluded to, and the transition has taken 9 years since we were leaving the EU, from the old system to the new one. That has created massive uncertainty for farmers, and it's not surprising that a lot of them have felt very insecure and have, in some cases, had to leave the industry. So we need a change on that, but we also need, the other things that have come out of the last several years is price instability. So we've had inflation, which has caused the instability in the price of food items, and that has had an effect on our farmers as well, and that's another reason that it's been really hard. So we fundamentally need a change in our direction. We need a change in direction from what the Conservatives are doing. Mel's been saying that he's been doing a lot on farming. Unfortunately, it's not backed up by the action that's actually taken place in this area.
One Wednesday evening we had a request from a member of the audience asking if we could turn the music off. We can't turn the music off, it's bell practice. I hope a lot of you at the back there are still able to hear. So, after the next question, I might give the candidates a little time to respond. But we've got quite a meaty question coming up here. So, and it does bear relevance to some of the other questions. So bear with me while I read it. And this is from Inga Page, who is at the doorway, giving us a wave. I hope you're all right standing, Inga. So, Inga asks, we now live in a country of private wealth and public squalor. Since 2008, our public services have been decimated, and at the same time, the very wealthy, the top 5%, have grown much wealthier. Inequality is greater than at any time since the Victorians. Why is no party, apart from the Greens, talking about raising large amounts of money from the very rich to help regenerate our health service, education system, social services, prisons, etc.? I am referring to wealth taxes, land taxes, and a revamped council tax system. We've also been asked questions, but I won't be scheduling them, on how will your party address the problem of affordable rented accommodation when we have so many Airbnbs and second homes, and the government has estimated that there are 4.3 million children, or 30% of all children in the UK in 2022-2023 living in relative low-income households. What would candidates do to help reduce these appalling levels of poverty? So, question number 3, I think it's Jill, you're going to start on this one for us.
What? All that in one question? Okay. Inequality has increased, and I think it is very hard to imagine the depth of the difficulties that makes for people. We see it in the fact that life expectancy has gone up in upper groups, but it's gone down in the poorer groups of the population. So we have had numerous comments from the Joseph Rowntree Charitable Trust and from other UN rapporteurs on poverty about their concerns that the UK poverty is increasing. I'm told absolute poverty has decreased since 2010, but it's clear that in the last few years it has increased with the use of food banks, with low-paid workers. This is not about being out of work, this is about wage levels as well. So we are facing an appalling situation. The question asks, what would we do about it? So the first thing that I have to say is that the Green Party would be honest with people about what it will cost to deal with some of those issues. We independently costed some of the Labour and Liberal Democrat proposals for the health service and found that we were told that they were undercosted, and we've recently seen reports that confirm that. So we would aim to spend a considerably greater amount on the health service, amounting to up to 50 billion by 2030. And we would also be honest about the way that we finance that. A fairer tax and benefit system with a rising universal credit, which has been pinpointed as utterly inadequate to cover basic necessities by the UN rapporteur, not by an interested party in the UK. And we would introduce, remove the upper limit on national insurance, introduce a small wealth tax of 1% for those whose fortune amounts to more than 10 billion and 2% for the top, those for more than $1 billion. Perhaps I'll continue in another question. I would be grateful.
Was it Inga? Inga, your question was why aren't the parties talking about raising large sums of money? Well, the Liberal Democrats are talking about raising large sums of money. We're raising large sums of money to address inequality and specifically child poverty. And I'll give you some examples of the sums that we intend to raise. So our proposals in our manifesto amount to about £26 billion worth of additional expenditure. Just to give you some idea of where that money is going to come from. We're going to reverse the Conservatives' tax cuts for banks, and that will raise £4.2 billion. We're going to change capital gains tax so that it's fairer, something that Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor actually espoused, and that will raise £5.2 billion. We're going to impose a windfall tax on the gas and oil companies, which will raise £2.1 billion. And we're going to get people to pay the tax that they actually owe. And we believe that we can raise another £7.2 billion from that. So we are going to raise large sums of money. We are not in the first instance going to do it by changing income tax, national insurance or VAT, but we do intend to raise money. Now, the second part of the question was about affordable housing. So the Liberal Democrats have committed to building 380,000 extra homes a year, of which 150,000 would be social housing. So that is housing provided by councils for rent, for a fair rate. It is one of the scandals of this age that councils struggle to build social housing. And I know because 2 Liberal Democrat councils in this constituency struggle to fulfil our commitments to building social housing. But we are going to change all that, and we are going to start building good quality social housing.
Thank you. And now to Arthur.
I think all of us that are interested in politics have like one single issue that kicks off our interest. And for me, it's poverty in the UK. As I mentioned earlier, in our own constituency, nearly 1 in 5 children live in poverty. We're living in poverty in 2022 and 2023. It's something like between 18.1% and 19.5% of children, depending on which town you live in this constituency. And that's not their fault. That's not by accident. That's by design, through a rigged system, through a Tory party that kept it that way for 14 years and has made it worse during that time. And I can't see that Labour are going to make it any better for people that live in poverty across our constituency. I mean, they're not opposing a cap on bankers' bonuses, but they are going to keep the 2-child benefit cap, which is only going to compound poverty more within our communities. Now, the gap between rich and poor in this country is massive. The top 1% in this country receive 80% of the wealth. Now I'm told, oh yeah, but you know, the top 1% pay 30% of the tax. Well, that means that the rest of us that have 20% of the wealth pay 70% of the tax. So you can see that there is a huge disparity here. So this is why I am fully in favour of, you know, everybody says, well, you know, who's going to pay for it? And my answer to Mel Stride is you are, and your likes are, and your class are, because this has been, this is a rigged system that you have supported for years. Now, in terms, and I've seen what, unless you have lived with poverty or you have family or friends who live in poverty, you just can't imagine the horror of waking up to that every day. It's and I know what it does to relationships and to families and to people's self-worth and to their mental health. I know people who suffer so badly from the effects of poverty that the time of day they look forward to the most is 8 p.m. when they go to sleep to try and escape the horror of their day. That's the reality of it, and that's why I'm standing for election, to give those people a voice. Okay, that's my time up.
Next to Ollie.
Child poverty has gone up by 700,000 among Conservatives, and over 4 million people, 4 million children now in working families. And last year, 1 million children experienced destitution. So we need to act on this. There's no question. So what's Labour going to do? Well, as has been the debate, you know that the Labour Party has set out initial commitments in its manifesto as a down payment on future things that it will do. So that if you ask me if the funding that the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party and Arthur are talking about to do those things, no, it's not in the manifesto right now. But we believe that we need to tackle these problems, and that's what we're going to do over the next 5 years when we get our economy stable and we get growth again, so that we can tackle those issues and have budgets that progressively deal with them. A couple of other things. One of the biggest challenges is making work pay, because a lot of people in poverty are not people who are not working, they're people in work. So the Labour Party is going to deliver a new deal for working people, introducing legislation within the first 100 days. We're going to consult with business, we're going to consult with workers, we're going to consult with unions, and we're going to put in place plans to ban zero-hour contracts, end fire and rehire, introduce basic rights in work from day one, parental sick leave, sick pay, and protections from unfair dismissal. And all of those things are going to help people at the lower end in work, because they need, people just don't have dignity right now in a lot of parts of work, and feel helpless, like Arthur was saying. And that's what, so we need to do those things. There's lots more we can talk about on the subject. Housing is so important, but I think I'm running out of time, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So poverty, I think we need to define what we're talking about, because there are at least two things that have been referred to in this debate. One is relative poverty, which is how much net income I have relative to the net income of the rest of the population. The problem with that is that everybody can get poorer, but relative poverty can decrease at the same time. So it's just how you're doing relative to other people, which is why this government and the previous government used something called absolute poverty after housing costs. And on that measure, the level of absolute poverty has decreased across almost all cohorts since the last Labour government. So 100,000, don't go away and do Google it, read who you like. Yes. 100,000 fewer children, 100,000 fewer children in absolute poverty since 2010. 1.3 million fewer people in poverty since 2010, and 200,000 fewer pensioners in poverty since 2010. And just dwelling on pensioners and Labour policy, under the last Labour government, because of the way they treated pensioners, you may remember Gordon Brown's 75p increase.
Can you let Mel finish talking, please?
We actually ended up with the fourth highest level of pensioner poverty in the whole of Europe, and that is an absolute disgrace, and that happened on Labour's watch. One of the reasons why 1.3 million fewer people are in absolute poverty is a lot of them are pensioners who we've looked after, particularly through the triple lock. But the way in which you address it are a variety of things. We've touched on a number of them. One was a lot of the cost of living payments that I mentioned in my opening remarks. We pumped out billions of pounds to try and support those people, particularly on lower incomes. Ollie is right that work is the best way out of poverty. That's why the national living wage has gone up by about 10% in each of the last 2 years. Universal credit that always makes work pay was something that this government brought in. Pensions being increased by the triple locks made a huge difference. The local housing allowance, which is the amount that's paid to people who are on low incomes needing help with housing, I personally put up to the 30th percentile, which would have taken tens and tens of thousands of children in those families out of poverty. The tax system is progressive, including the personal allowance, which means that 2 or 3 million people who are low paid don't pay any tax now, whereas they did before. I'm sorry I've run out of time.
Thank you, Mel. That was quite a complex question. I understand feelings are running strongly in the audience, but really we do need to listen to the candidates. I'm now going to invite the candidates just to give me, if they would like to, a right of reply on anything, but please very briefly. John?
There is an issue about how we measure poverty, I agree that. I think I trust the Joseph Rowntree Charitable Trust when they say that since 2017, the number of people in absolute destitution, which means fearing they cannot eat or heat or find a home, has grown 2.5 times and includes 3.8 million people in 2022 and 1 million children.
In 2010, we didn't have food banks. Now we have food banks, and we continue to have them. And that's a reflection. And it's a shame on our nation that that's the case. I mean, it's great. People, don't get me wrong, people who run food banks do amazing work, and they're pillars of their community. But it's an absolute shame that we need them in our society.
Thank you. I think, is there any others? Arthur's waiting behind me. Apologies, Arthur.
I would just like to pick up on the point that Mel is very fond of saying that work is the best thing to get you out of poverty. It's the best thing for mental health. I know people that work 60 hours a week in 2 jobs and they still need benefits to top up their salary.
Yeah.
So 3 days ago, a well-respected organisation, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, examined all the manifestos, and it did raise some issues which I think the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives and Labour do need to address. But one thing it did try to do is to quantify whose manifesto was best for the least well paid. Only the Liberal Democrats will be putting money back into people's pockets. The analysis shows that everybody is poor under Labour. The poor are poorer under the Conservatives and the rich are richer. It's only the Liberal Democrats have a policy where the poor are richer and the rich are poorer.
So well, come back on Arthur's point. He's absolutely right. Look, if work is defined as doing several jobs and not being paid next to nothing for doing it, of course work is the way out of poverty. But that's not what we are all about as a government. We're about progression in work. We do a huge amount within DWP and our job centres to help people get better jobs, better paid jobs. I've referred to the national living wage increases way above inflation. We were the party that brought the national living wage into being. We have a near record level of employment in this country. We have very low level of unemployment. It's about half the level that it was under the last Labour government. Youth unemployment has fallen by about 45% under this government. Under the Labour government, it went up by about 45%. So we have a very strong record on jobs.
Thank you. So,
No.
so we're doing well, but we're a whole hour into this and we've only got through 3 questions. I can see that the audience would like maybe to make some comments. I think what we need is a bit of a shuffle actually, because I've been sitting for a whole hour. If we just spend 30 seconds just shuffling, I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah, he's independent, used to be Labour, but still doesn't think Labour should be right with. Agrees with them and agrees with Green? She's the one with the grey hair.
Something you regret, so that's your shuffle over with. So if you can shuffle back now. Yeah. I realise it's quite stuffy, but if you could settle for question 4. Because we'd like to get at least 7 questions in today, and we're aiming to finish at 9 o'clock. It's looking less and less likely, but we can hope. So, question 4. Question 4 is from Sheena Felton from Hay Tor. Sheena, if you're in the audience, give us a wave. Thank you, Sheena. Sheena, I'm going to start by apologising because you gave us a very long question. I'm going to abbreviate it. Sheena raised various points in it to clarify matters. But let's abbreviate it. So, Sheena asked, if elected, what will your stance be about the state of our waterways? How will you tackle Pennon Group PLC? She makes reference to the Herculean task for the water companies because in legislation they're allowed to pay 30% dividends to shareholders. And another question's been asked about this too. What steps will you put in place to hold South West Water to account for the illegal discharge of untreated sewage into our rivers and seas? And how will you enforce zero tolerance of this illegal and appalling practice going forward? So I'm losing track here. This must be 4. So this must go to Mark.
Thank you. So we live in an unusual general election in that it's the first TikTok general election. And like some of the other candidates, I've been out recording videos, and hopefully some of you will see some of my videograms. And I decided, obviously, as the Liberal Democrats have championed very much the whole issue of sewage and water pollution, that I should do something on exactly that. So we went and found a very nice location on the River Tyne, near Chagford, and the water looked beautiful, the day was beautiful. And I said to the person filming me, I said to my cameraman, I said, you know, it looks so perfect. I tell you what we ought to do here. I ought to dip a glass of water into the water, pick it up and drink it and make the point. And he said, no, don't do that. He said, 20 yards up there, they're discharging sewage, so are you certain? And there's the problem with water and water pollution. Are you certain? It's not always floaters in the water that give away that it is polluted. We have a real problem. The Liberal Democrats have outlined a solution. That is to turn the water companies into public benefit companies, stop them making profits, sorry, not stop them making profits, stop them paying dividends, stop them paying bonuses to their executives. We would abolish Ofwat, which has become institutionally captured by the water companies, and we would replace it with a new regulator that had real teeth to make a real difference. We would introduce a blue flag system for our rivers so that you can be assured that our rivers are healthy and clean. That's important not just for us. I mean, we all obviously love a clean environment, but it is even more important for our ecosystems. We need urgent action on water. It is a scandal that after they have been privatised, they have borrowed £70 billion, which they have effectively given to their shareholders.
Arthur on Zoom, please.
Well, yeah, this is what happens with the privatisation of our public utilities. The need to satisfy your shareholders and the need to produce a profit leads to cutting corners. It also leads to this sort of hubris where people think that they can get away with whatever they want because they never get prosecuted. They never get fully held to account for it. So this is why, like I said earlier, I would bring our public utilities, including our water companies, back into public ownership where they belong.
Thank you, Arthur. Naturally.
Yeah, Susan Davies paid £860,000 to run South West Water and has been failing in discharging sewage even on dry days into our rivers and seas over the last year and for many years. I think the thing we need to do is start by, I think we can do this quickly. I mean, I don't think this is a very unsolvable problem. We put the water companies under special measures that mean they can't pay their shareholders' dividends and they can't pay their bosses' bonuses unless they stop discharge into our rivers and seas. As simple as that. That's the Labour's policy. We have a policy of special measures for water companies. I think it's a long-term issue, obviously, to fix our sewage system, but the reality is, under privatisation, as Mark was saying, so much money is being paid out, and we haven't seen the return on that. And that's got to change. So until these problems are fixed, I'm saying, and Labour's saying, no more bonuses, no more dividends. Yeah, so, oh, the other big point, I can't read my own writing, sorry. The Conservatives effectively made the water companies mark their own homework on sewage discharge from 2016. We'd bring that back to the Environment Agency so that the Environment Agency is monitoring that discharge from all the outlets, so that we know what's going on. So all those measures together, I think, can solve this problem in the short term. We've got a big problem with investment in our water companies, but we can sort this out. And we can stop South West Water polluting our rivers and seas so we can go swimming.
Thank you. Now,
Ollie's right, it's a long-term problem, but that doesn't mean that Ollie's right that there's a quick solution, because there isn't to a long-term problem, and that's the issue. So if you look at the last Labour government, we had 7% of storm overflow were monitored for sewage. It's now 100%. And the reason is that we absolutely want to get on top of this. Ollie is absolutely right about the long term. We need to invest actually hundreds of billions, and to put that into context, we spend about 150 billion or thereabouts on the NHS, employing over 1 million people, okay, for a year. And we need orders of magnitude of that to sort out a Victorian sewage system. If you went for a quick fix, which was what the Duke of Wellington's amendment to our environment bill was all about, which is why people accuse me of voting to dump sewage in rivers, I mean, an insane person would vote for that. What if you had accepted that? What you would have done was mandated that these companies stopped it almost immediately, and it would have come out somewhere else in your streets and in your homes. So it is a long-term challenge. Where it is absolutely right is we need to hold these companies, including South West Water, to account, and that's why we have strong fines. So we fined 150 million to date. That has gone into funding cleaning up our rivers. Criminal liability needs to be there, and it is there. Directors, as has been suggested by other parties, we need to hold them to account on their bonuses and the dividends that they pay to their shareholders. And the regulator now has the ability in the Secretary of State to enforce that. And we need to have plans agreed with those businesses, which we are putting into place, which can be altered and enforced and dictated by the Secretary of State, which is what is in the legislation. And that is what needs to drive the long-term investment. This idea that Arthur has, that nationalisation is a great thing. I know it's the new zeitgeist. People have forgotten what British Rail and British Telecom and other companies were really like, okay, when they were in the public sector. They were disastrous. You waited weeks to get somebody to turn up, and 3 people turned up, and you didn't get your problem solved. And part of the problem with water will be, you may say it's a natural monopoly. What will happen if you put it in the charge of politicians as to how much gets invested? You will have some state decisions between investing in hospitals and things that people want immediately, and the long-term investment you need, and you won't get long-term investment.
You've been there 14 years. I mean,
now moving to Jill, and then I will open to the audience for a short time.
I'm getting a different impression from people who work with the Environment Agency, that 10 or 12 years ago, if there was a remark about a pollution incident, they went out, measured it, inspected it, issued a fine if there was pollution. That is no longer the case. They have lost so much funding. The Green Party argues for an extra 1.5 billion for the Environment Agency to do the job that it was supposed to, and to be able to issue fines on the spot. They claim that they have been persuaded to take a light touch approach to regulation. In other words, first to approach and talk to the water companies, to make some comments, and to use a fine owner as a last resort. That needs to change. We also would take water companies into public ownership. To have a financial incentive to make profit out of water is not suitable for something which is so basic to our well-being and a human right, water.
yeah.
We would also want to have a 12 billion fund for infrastructure to immediately manage sewage and water, so that some of the dire issues can be sorted out. So people in Exmouth, for example, are up in arms because lorries are going there to dump water into a facility which pipes it out to sea. This is outrageous, and we want to change.
Okay, this is where you can use the roving mic, and I really would like it used because it does make it easier for people to hear. So there's a woman in the middle here, white top.
I'm going to...
Could you bring the mic right up to you?
Yes.
Yep, lovely,
Mel,
thank you.
at the time when you were saying Lord Wellington's bill was amendment, and you were actually writing very rude emails back to those that were concerned about the shit that was getting into our waterways, you said, "We have also made our expectations crystal clear in our draft strategic policy statement to Ofwat, where for the first time the government will tell the industry's economic regulator that we expect water companies to take steps to significantly reduce storm overflows and that we expect funding to be approved for them to do so." That was what you said, right? You also said in the same email that you regularly met and what wonderful things you were doing with the water companies. So I'm aware from a conversation that I had with Susan Davey, the CEO of Penning Group, that you did, the local MPs did meet with Penning Group PLC. She also agreed with me that the current model was not suitable for a water company. The Environment Agency's data for 2023 shows a 54% increase in the number of sewage spills compared to 2022. Thus, Mr. Stride was clearly over-optimistic and probably still is about the effects of the Environment Act 2021 and the power of the Conservative government and local MPs with regard to persuading the water companies to improve water quality.
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. So you're absolutely right, and I stand by what I wrote in my email that you've just read out, and I think that's precisely what I've just said from this platform, which is that we are working on and delivering plans with the water companies. The Secretary of State has the ability to step in if he or she considers those plans to be inadequate and to enforce them with all the kind of penalties around that arrangement that I've already set out. In terms of discharges, and I will say this because you've raised it, there is a part of the UK where it's far worse in terms of discharge per storm outlet, and that's Wales, and that's where the Labour Party is in charge. So I just make that point. Well, you can look it up, Google, go and see. Okay, that happens to be the case. This is not something that can, as I said already, with the Duke of Wellington's amendment, is not something that could have been solved just by some kind of parliamentary diktat. It will take multiple years of massive investment to resolve this problem. What you've got to ask yourself is who's got the realistic plan in the long term to deliver.
14 years
Thank
later.
you. I'm going to be quite strict here because we want to hear from all the panellists here and maybe two from Zoom and Steve. So quickly, Jill.
In some of our rivers, it's not just sewage, and in the Exe it's more farm waste. So I think that the importance of funding farmers to do environmental land management is crucial in regard to their doing the public good of looking after water and devoting land to it. So I think that's a crucial element. And we also need the planning system to recognise the difficulties that face achieving net zero and to achieving wholesome water. So reforms in the NPPF to recognise that some developments might not be good for overflowing sewage would be good. We could do with powers for local authorities to investigate what effect major developments would have on water supply and storm overflows and to decide accordingly on their applications.
So I'm not here to defend Labour and certainly not here to defend Labour in Wales, but the reality is that of the 5 worst constituencies in England for water pollution, 3 of them are here in Devon. And guess what? We are one of those 3. So we have a problem and it does need to be addressed. And I'll make one other comment on Ofwat. How do we know that water enforcement regulation is not taking place? It's because Ofwat are having dinner with the executives of the water companies. That sort of cosy relationship has to be broken up. They have to understand that their role is to represent us and represent our best interest, not to play footsie with the water companies.
Steve, I think you're next in line if you do want to make any further comment. Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, what did you say? I missed that.
Sorry, Arthur. Arthur, if you want to make any further comment, it's your time. I'm being distracted by your name.
No, you're okay. I've already said my piece on bringing the waterways back into public ownership.
Thank you. Thank you. Then just, Ollie, if you have any closing comments on that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mel pointed out lots of fines that could be imposed on water companies, measures that could be taken. I think the question for Mel is, why haven't those happened in the last few years when we've seen such a disaster?
They have. £150 million worth of
Not enough.
Right. I think. Okay. I think it might be time for the next question now. I'll take one more comment from the floor, though.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were inviting questions.
No, I'm afraid not. We've got we have actually on the table 3 more questions that have been posted in advance. So I'll take 2 and then we'll review. Question number 5 is quite a lengthy one. I'm going to précis it. It's from Bryony Greenhill from Buckfast-Lee. Bryony is here. Very fortuitous, Bryony. You have another one, okay. It'll have to be this one, I'm afraid. What will you do about the problem of cars and the provision of good public transport in central Devon? And Bryony quotes some of this being around climate change and the need to stop using fossil fuels, the impossibility of all these cars being electric within Earth's limits, insufficient parking space for residents in Buckfast-Lee, and the answer not being a new car park, perhaps car sharing schemes and better public transport instead, streets used to be for children, now they're for cars, health issues for people living within 85 metres of the A38, which many of us do. So the question that finishes up, what will you do now to help us move towards a future with far fewer cars and much less need for a personal car in central Devon? That's question 5, which in the rota goes to you, Arthur, on Zoom.
Well, thank you. You'll be pleased to know that I am a 1-car household, and it is a Fiat Panda for those narrow lanes around where I live. I mean, we need much better public transport, surely. I think the answer lies in buses. We have 1 bus that comes in to our village in Lustley at 2:30 in the afternoon. So by the time you get to Newton Abbot and that, you can't get back. So it seems to me that for people, particularly, again, people who live in poverty in rural areas, they get stuck. They just can't get anywhere. They can't get anywhere to work. They can't get anywhere to socialize. And if they do, they have to drive. So I think the answer lies in better public transport for sure. On a side note there is also, just as the subject of car parking has come up, there is a car park in Chagford that requires you to punch in your registration number when you purchase your ticket, so that it ties your ticket to your car. And that really winds me up, because that robs us of that random act of human kindness where you come back to your space early and give somebody your ticket. Now, again, that is by design. People that make these decisions are promoted because all they see is untapped profit. And it's just another way of ripping us off and destroying our communities and destroying that human spirit that comes between us all.
So, Ollie.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? We live in, I mean, this town, many towns in across central Devon are there because of the railways. And those railways, unfortunately, have gone. It would be great if we had a train line still in Ashburton, in quite fastly, in lots of other places across Devon. We've just about got one in Oakhampton now, but it's going to take a while to fix that, right? I mean, we can't fix that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If we could do that, it would be 20 years. So the first step we need is better buses, right? Because the point that's already been mentioned, people cannot get to college if you want to go to college from Ashburton. You used to be able to do that very easily several years ago. The bus timetable now doesn't allow that for kids. I've spoken to many people here about that. So Labour's policy on that is to allow local communities to take back control of local bus services, which is effectively ending deregulation that started in the 1980s under the last Conservative government. So I think that's a massive step, because it allows also innovation in how bus services are provided. We need to, car sharing has been alluded to. I've been a member of the car club, it's great, but they're not really supported by our local councils, and they should be, because they're a great thing that can allow people to maybe already have one car or have no car to get around when they need to. So there's so many things we can do on this, but the core one is giving communities back control of the services that they need, so they can decide where and when they need them.
Thank you. One of the things that we've done is stop HS2, which I think is to our advantage here in central Devon. So £36 billion that will go out into communities across the country, from the north down to the southwest. There is a £2 bus fare policy that we have rolled out. Many people here may be benefiting from that. In terms of different modes of bus transport, electric buses are going to be very important, and we are rolling those out. And that is Stagecoach, a private provider, that's doing that in North Devon and Torridge at the moment, and there are plans to bring it into Exeter as well in time. On rail, I do think that's really important. One of the things that I first did when I got elected in 2010 was to bring Patrick McLaughlin, who was then the Secretary of State for Transport, down to Oakhampton. We would literally physically walk the track from there to Meldon. We had meetings with local people. I then had Claire Perry, the rail minister, a year or so later, come down. I pressed with Grant Shapps, so he was Secretary of State of Transport. We finally got the money, it was £40 million, to get that railway back up and running, and that has now been achieved. It has an hourly service. 250,000 people use that railway between Oakhampton and Crediton and Exeter in the last year. And there's more, which is that I led a campaign to raise the money for a new station and transport hub in the east of Oakhampton. It's £13.5 million, and that will not just be a brand new wonderful station, which will serve the hinterland around Oakhampton as well as Oakhampton itself, but also it will have EV charge points, it will be buses going in and out of that area. It will be a real hub that will help with public transport. So I think things can be done, they take time, but I think there is evidence that I, as your MP, have achieved some things in that area. Thank you.
Can we now move to Jill?
Yeah, I agree that electric cars are not the answer for everything on this, although they can contribute to reducing the emissions from car transport. So there are some people who absolutely need private motorised transport, and I think that for some of the campaigns it would be good to recognise the needs of these people, but many of us don't need them so much. And what I'd like to see, as well as a move to electric cars, fair enough as far as it goes, is more consideration of 15-minute neighbourhoods and the importance of being able to get the services that we need close to us, and that needs good public services as well, so that things are as accessible as possible. I'd like to see public transport run in a way which is fair compared to the car. So motorists don't pay for the cost of building roads or for all the services that go to keep that going. And in fact, the extra car journey costs only the petrol or the electric fuel. With buses, when they are run privately, you pay the average cost covering all the capital things. So it's not the same, it's not a level playing field. And to get the best use of public transport, which has a very high capital cost, but very low, you know, the cost of an extra bus passenger is relatively low. To get the best use out of the buses, you need a low fee for the service and pay the capital cost collectively. This is what used to happen when councils ran bus services to varying degrees. So I would completely agree that local authorities should be allowed to run bus services when they want to be responsible to their communities, and that would give us a better use of public transport. I am interested that the Devon Climate Assembly said in its deliberations, no financial incentives to get out of our cars till affordable, reliable alternatives are available. That sounds authentically Devon to me. There are places where these are not available. Hopefully we will be able to make them available, but until they are, people need their cars. Thank you.
So my work takes me to London every now and again, and I can get anywhere on public transport quickly, safely, and relatively cheaply. But that density of public transport that London enjoys is very difficult to replicate in this rural community, even along this A38 corridor running into Exeter. So I think we have to recognise that for people who live outside of the towns, who live in the villages and hamlets, a car is a prerequisite. You know, for me to go to my local supermarket is a 20-minute drive. That is the closest supermarket to. The public transport that we have in the area of central Devon I live is not adequate to get me there on a consistent basis. Now, we can mitigate the impact of cars, and I will come on, when part of your question was about the future, I will come on and talk about that. So we can mitigate the impact of cars, and the Liberal Democrats would certainly introduce more walkways and cycleways so that we can encourage people to walk and cycle. We would put control back in the hands of local councils to take more control of their bus services. We'd enhance rail electrification to reduce the pollution caused by the railways. We'd reopen some smaller stations. We'd look for more charging points for cars. We'd freeze rail fares. We'd simplify ticketing. Those are all mitigation factors. But long term, what do we do about cars? Well, obviously we can encourage people to move to electric cars, and that will be good for the environment. But ultimately, we probably want to see fewer cars, because even electric cars come with an environmental impact. Now, I think the good news is that in the not too distant future, we are going to see autonomous vehicles. Those are cars that can drive themselves. And as soon as we see those, we will be able to book them, buy an app, they will turn up, and we'll be able to travel. That will vastly reduce the number of cars on our roads. I would strongly suggest that any incoming government invest heavily in these new green technologies and gets them going. I would love to see autonomous vehicles within the 5 years of the next government.
Any burning points from the panel?
A climate change assembly was mentioned by Jill, and I think this assembly is really good. When I was chair of the Treasury Select Committee for 3 years, cross-party committee to hold the government to account, we had a big report on green issues and how finance can be geared to drive low carbon investment. And we had set up a climate assembly. It was absolutely brilliant. I went up to COP26 in Glasgow, and I presented to COP26 the findings, or in part the findings, of that particular assembly. So I think there, with the Greens, we have common ground.
Okay, question number 6, and this has been asked in 3 different ways. What I'm looking for here is a fairly succinct answer. It's quite a challenging question. So from Tim Farrell from Chudley. Thank you, Tim. Your most succinct question: how will your party seek to restore public confidence in politics? Similar to another question raised, how do you intend to clean up politics and address corruption, lack of accountability, and broken promises? And also from another questioner, I am fully aware of the permanent cut and thrust of politics, but one of the aspects of the current situation that shocks, depresses and angers me most is the often total disregard for the meaning of words, and for any basis of morality essential for our trust in decision makers. I would like to hear the candidates' opinions on this. So, as question number 6, this returns to start with you, Ollie.
I think this is really important. So public confidence in politics has definitely been broken by lots of things over the last 14 years. I mean, I'm not going to say it's just the last 14 years. There was the expenses scandal before that and other things. But particularly in the time of this government, I think there's been a feeling that there's kind of one rule for people involved in making decisions and another rule for the rest of us. And that's been, borne out with Partygate, with the COVID contracts. One measure that I'll just start with a measure that the Labour Party has got on this, which is to stop the relationship between ministers and government contracts in the way that we saw during COVID, because that's got to change. Because no one has got confidence in that it's not the right way things should be. Other things we're going to do are reform the House of Lords and eventually abolish the House of Lords. But the broader issue is that we, as a country, have lost faith in our politicians because they don't necessarily keep their promises. We remember the Dems from 2010 when they promised to abolish tuition fees. When they came into power, basically they did the opposite. So examples like that make us distrust our politicians. That's why the Labour manifesto has been cautious in terms of some of the initial measures. That's why we've said a lot of things are down payment on the future, because we know that we need both the public's confidence, but also the confidence of the market, effectively, that when we come in, things are going to be stable so that we can get the economic growth that we need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There are mechanisms with MPs for expelling MPs from the Commons. There's something called a recall petition, which you're probably aware of, which means if the Standards Committee decides to impose a penalty of a certain level, and it's down to the local electorate to decide if there's a by-election. So there are mechanisms in place. I do believe that we need to review that, and I would be very happy to work on a cross-party basis, as I did as chair of the Treasury Select Committee, with any member of Parliament if I'm re-elected, to look at that more closely. I would make two other points, though, which I think are important. The first one is that there are many, many very good MPs, okay? And you will hear about the ones, and they come across all parties actually, it's not just the Conservative Party, it's the Labour Party as well, and Lib Dems too, who behave really appallingly, and they get exposed very publicly, and they suffer very greatly, one imagines, if they've got any sense of decency about them, to be exposed to that form of transparency. But the final point I would make is about all of us. If we want a better politics, we've got to attract more people into politics, and we've got to try and take down the barriers that put people off politics. Now, the public square has been very easy to access by everybody. Everyone in this room can go on my Twitter site and can post the most vile comments, aspersions about me, about my family, about my children, about my wife, and so on and so forth. And I just have to roll with that. I went canvassing in Bolton Hampstead in the last election, 2019, which was one of the most difficult elections, I would say, in terms of the heat that was generated in that election, because it was a Corbyn against ourselves, etc. It got very heated. It was a much more heated debate in this event last time around, for example. And I was just standing outside the co-op, and a lady came right across the street out of a shop that she was running there, and she shouted at very high volume in my face for about a minute at that sort of distance, while other people stood around and they filmed it all on their iPhone. And I thought after that had finished, apart from just keeping my cool, what might my daughters think if they had seen that, and what might they think if they ever considered a career in politics. So I say to you, I throw it back a little bit, and very gently, because I know you're the electorate, but we're all part of the solution of a better politics.
What will the Green Party do to seek to restore public confidence in politics? What a good question. First of all, we need an independent electoral commission. its independence has been removed under this government. It's supposed to operate under a statement agreed with government, and its power to prosecute people who disobey the rules has been removed. That happened sometime around Boris Johnson's wallpaper being questioned. So we want to restore its independence. We want proportional representation, as you know. That would give us a number of MPs in relation to the votes for each party. At the moment it takes 38,000 to elect a Conservative, 50,000 to elect a Labour, 330,000 to elect a Lib Dem, and 800,000 to elect Caroline Lucas. We want a fair playing field. And as it is, 38, 40% can give a huge majority to one party, so it's a bit like a dictatorship. So the other thing about proportional representation is that it leads to a more collaborative style of politics, because you might not slag somebody off quite so freely if you're going to be looking for a coalition or a collaboration on something the next day. So I think that would transform our politics. I think there should be limits to political donations, and wouldn't it be amazing if there was a limit that was what everybody could afford, like a tenner? Some people can give millions to parties, and don't they want a return for it? So, we need a removal of the gagging law on third-party campaigners. That means organisations that support specific issues and people who have much greater limits on their lobbying and what they can do compared to lobbyists from fossil fuel companies and such like. So limitations on that.
It probably won't surprise you that variations on this question have come up at previous hustings, and I have to say that Jill and I basically hope to get to answer the question first, because I don't think there's essentially anything we differ on in how this should be tackled. So at the risk of sort of repeating exactly what Jill has said, the critical thing I think about rebuilding trust in politicians, and that was the core of the question, is breaking the ability of MPs to sit on huge majorities without any concern that they are ever going to lose their seats. And we need to break that cycle. You need your politicians to fear you, to fear what you will vote for when the next general election comes around. It is too often the case that that does not happen. That is fundamentally why we need proportional representation, and that will go a long way to restoring people's confidence in politicians, because it will keep politicians honest. One thing Jill didn't refer to, but I'm sure is in the Green Manifesto somewhere, is that the Liberal Democrats would enshrine the ministerial code in legislation. They say, well, that seems a bit arcane, a bit, strange and so on. But the reality is that there are a load of, nice chap codes in our government that people can choose to ignore if they wish, and there is no way really of holding people to account. We would enshrine those good chap rules in legislation.
Thank you. And Arthur?
We're coming to the end of 14 years of the most corrupt government of modern times. And my fear is that we're about to head into another one headed up by Keir Starmer, who, it's a foregone conclusion that Keir Starmer will be our next Prime Minister. And if he wants us to trust him, he better start changing the way he presents himself. He's already U-turned on so many issues that I've lost count. But how can you trust anyone that won't call out the genocide in Gaza for what it is? This is the defining moral issue of our times, and to fudge around it and to ignore it, or to say that the Israeli state has the right to cut off water and food to a civilian population beggars belief. And he does it because he's scared of saying anything that is in alignment with Jeremy Corbyn and to appease the right-wing press. And it's shameful. I don't know how anybody thinks that this is someone who can be trusted coming into government. Earlier this week, we were all invited to give a 500-word piece about ourselves for the Moorlander newspaper, which we did. And not one of the other candidates in this contest even brought up the subject of Gaza or even poverty across our constituency. And I challenge the candidates right now to call it out as genocide, right now on this platform.
Before we do that, I would like to turn to Tim, who asked that question originally, in case there's anything, Tim, you would like to say.
Hang on. Just a sec, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all the candidates for coming this evening to talk to us. I think you've all given some very good responses. I think we do have to move away from the sort of politics. Mel, I really do appreciate what you've done personally for the constituency, but I personally couldn't vote for the Conservative Party simply because of the whole Partygate scandal and other things like it. And I know there have been other issues with other parties as well. But I think the public perception has really been damaged by the current government, and I would like to see a change. Really, whoever's in government, I would like to see a change in direction and sort of a greater integrity, perhaps, by some members of the political parties. Thank you.
I'm sure there's sentiments shared by a lot of the audience. One comment from the back, gentleman in the baseball cap.
Thanks. This is a slightly big question. It's something specific to Ollie, something that Ollie said, so I'd appreciate if you want to just move on. I don't know much about the House of Lords, but could you explain why it is, and I appreciate this isn't specific to Central Devon, so do tell me if you want to move on, but can you explain why it is that Labour wants to abolish the House of Lords?
That's a very, very big question,
yeah,
but basically it's huge is one thing. There's a lot of people that are life peers, so they've been there for, there's no age limit, so we bring in an age limit even as just a first measure. But fundamentally, we need the House of Lords does good work in some ways, but it's not representative of the nation because it's appointed by, unfortunately, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with ex-prime ministers, as people who appoint people, they're hopefully smart people, but if every person that goes into the House of Lords is just appointed by the last prime minister, and we just build up these huge numbers of people who have been on their own patronage, effectively, I think that's the wrong kind of chamber to represent us as a nation.
Thank you, Ollie. Then I'm going to move on. Then I will move on and ask each of the candidates here to comment on that challenge thrown at us by Arthur. But I ask the audience to remain respectful and to listen, please. I would like to give the panel the chance to reply either to that question or anything that was said in the question 6 about integrity. I might come to the audience. I'm asking Ollie, first of all, to come back.
Okay, so on Gaza, the most important thing we can do is stop people being maimed, dying, suffering in Gaza. It's not about us defining things as genocide, it's about stopping it happening. And I don't know why it's people, it's not, it doesn't matter what we say here, we've got to get the Israeli government to stop it, and we need therefore the Israeli people to stop it.
Thank you. Mel, is there anything you would like to add to this question?
Yeah, look, this is a really deep and difficult issue, actually, but boy, does it need to be resolved, because like everybody here, as a parent in particular, to witness on our television screens what is going on over there is truly horrific. We have to accept that the attack on Israel on the 7th of October was entirely barbarous. It was the worst attack since Nazi Germany and the Holocaust in terms of people being slaughtered and taken as hostages, perfectly innocent people. I think Hamas is a terrorist organisation. I do think they have to be dealt with, and I think Israel has a right to defend itself in that sense, but it has to do so proportionately. We have to have aid getting in there, which is why our Foreign Secretary has been over there countless times to work with other agencies and other governments to open up the areas, the border down in the south, to get that floating pontoon in, to get aid in as well, get the trucks of aid in. And we have to keep up the pressure to get the remaining hostages, of which there are probably about 100, we don't know this many of them may now be dead, out as part of a ceasefire, as an interim step towards a longer term solution. That solution will have to be a two-state solution in which Israel and the Palestinians learn to live together with separate parts of that part of the Middle East in which they occupy. We are sadly, and we have been since the creation of Israel in 1948, a long, long way off that happening, but the first step has got to be a humanitarian ceasefire, continuing to get aid in, getting the hostages out in order to stabilise the situation and build confidence for a peace deal further on down the line.
Thank you. The Green Party has called early and ceaselessly for a ceasefire to both sides. Both so that humanitarian aid can be delivered and a political solution negotiated. We are listening also to people who are seeking within Israel to look to a solution which provides for them safety and security. If we recognise Israel's right to self-defence, then what are we saying? That we recognise the right of Palestine to self-defence, an occupied country, people ejected from their land? Let's not start from there. It is an apartheid state. We recognise that. And that, but peace, earnestly to be hoped for, requires a political solution. And unfortunately, there are many people who are in despair that Netanyahu seems to be determined to continue the war to save his own position. So we stand in solidarity with those who are not conducting an armed struggle, but who want the recognition of human rights and of the rights of international law over war, and who want a negotiated solution and who are calling for that both within Israel and among Palestinian diaspora. And we do wish and stand for an immediate end to arms sales.
Yeah.
For the whole region.
The Liberal Democrats have been very clear and very vocal from the beginning of the conflict. Leila Moran, our spokesperson, has called for an immediate ceasefire, release of the hostages, resumption of humanitarian aid, and the start of negotiations towards a two-state solution. Now, we of all countries should understand that that last step is a very difficult step. We know from the conflict in Northern Ireland, the troubles in Northern Ireland, that we had two different communities with different points of view. We need to give the Palestinians and the Israelis the space and the encouragement to find their own solution, because it is only with a Good Friday type solution that we will see peace in Gaza and Israel.
Lest we despair too much, there is a stunning BBC documentary. It's quite a hard watch, called Once Upon a Time in Northern Ireland, and there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from that. Thank you, panellists, for answering in that way. So it's coming up to 9 o'clock, and this is what I would like to do. So here's some points from the audience. I'm aware there may be 20 or 30 points. That's impossible. But I would like to hear a little bit from the audience, then take one final question quickly before I give the candidates a chance to sum up at the end. So I understand that there are unasked questions. The candidates have had a copy of all questions asked before noon, and I will also show them the 4 questions now asked since then, so they will know the questions that are burning in people's minds. So, anyone from the floor would like at this point to say anything? We've got two hands raised at the back, and then one over here, and there's a hat being raised. So I'll take those 4, and that's all.
Hello. As a citizen and resident and member of the local community college, I'd like to ask Mel Stride a question which I've asked a couple of years ago. In 2016, we had another, Hustings here in Ashburton. 2017 it was. I was about 6 years old at this time, and I asked you the question of what does the Conservative Party offer in terms of educational funding and the lack of funding in education? And I don't seem to remember to be given an answer on this question. I was wondering in the 7 years' time since if now you have come up with an answer for that question, and I'd like to hear what other candidates have to say about this.
There may not be time for other candidates, I'm afraid, but certainly we'll give the floor to Mel.
Well, thank you very much. If you remember exactly what I said when you were 6 years old, then you're a very, very promising person indeed. But let me say that, yes, of course, funding for education, I fought for fairer funding for Devon for many years here, and we've secured substantially better funding as a consequence of my efforts and other MPs in the region. One of the areas where we're investing a lot is special education needs, the pupil premium, increasing that. We will create a further 15 SEN schools, for example. But look, the most important thing as young people go into the wider world and into employment is that they've had a good education. And the body that looks at education and Ofsted and classifies how good schools are show that in 2010, 68% of schools were good or outstanding. That figure today is 90%. There are international comparisons, something called the PISA tables, and if you look those up, you will find that under this government we have risen up in the sciences, in mathematics, in English. In fact, we have the best readers in the Western world now, okay? So those are all improved. Somebody works as if it doesn't matter. As somebody whose parents left school at 15 and 14 years old, and whose life was transformed by a free place at a grammar school, I think education really matters, and I think it does matter that we have the best readers in the Western world. So we've made real progress. There'll always be more to do. We've made a lot of progress.
Thank you, Mel. There was one more question over here. I'm not taking that question, I'm afraid, in the middle because I'm just taking time for 4. So there was one more question over there. Lady in the black, I can't see with the lights, blue top.
Hello. I was brought up to be an original, our family, I seem to think, were the original floating voters, and it was absolutely drummed into me that you voted for the person in your constituency who would do the best job for your constituency, whatever colour badge they wore. I've heard a lot of fantastically brilliant answers this evening, and I've really appreciated the time to listen to you all. I haven't heard a lot on why we in this constituency should vote for you as an individual to work for this constituency, and I would like to hear a little bit more, please.
I'm going to encourage the candidates to make that the focus of their wrapping up speech, if I may. So there was a question over here on this far side, and then a hat being raised, I believe, over the gentleman in the pink shirt. So this one first, please.
One big issue which we haven't heard much about this evening is Britain's relationship with the European Union and Brexit. I know that the 2 major parties want to avoid this topic, but I would like to know what they propose to do about our future relationship with the European Union and how to repair some of the damage that has been done by Brexit.
Right, I'm going to start that from the opposite end actually, and I'm going to ask for a 60-second, only 60-second, at which point you'll stop talking. Mark.
So do you remember during the, I hate using the word Brexit, do you remember during the Brexit debate, we were promised that nobody was talking about taking us out of the single market?
Yeah.
Do you remember that promise? We were promised no one was going to take us out of the single market. It seems to me perfectly reasonable, given that even those arguing that we should leave the European Union were saying we should stay in the single market, that we should aim to get back there. And that is one thing the Liberal Democrats are committed to doing. However, the whole Brexit debate has fractured our country, and we do not need to rerun it in all its gory detail. What we do need to do is to take small steps to rebuilding our relationship. And I would prefer, to talk about regaining benefits than rejoining.
That's it. Thank you.
Rebuilding friendships takes time and is vital with our nearest trading partners. There is a lot of bureaucracy that makes it difficult to export to the European Union and to import. Work on that. Work on showing that we're not prepared to disregard previous promises, as we have done to now, and work together diplomatically on some of the world's big problems that are going on in our African countries, climate change, and ensuring an appropriate response to the right-wing parties. Thank you.
Okay, so I voted and campaigned to remain in the EU, and obviously was not successful. I am a Democrat, so I totally respect the result, and I think that that is where we are, certainly for the foreseeable future. I always felt economically there were problems with dislocating yourself from your largest trading partner in the way that we have done. There are additional trade frictions that are resulting as a consequence, and the OBR basically defines the impact of that situation, and I accept that in my terms it is negative. But that's not the same thing as saying that there are no advantages to Brexit whatsoever, and you're blind to the whole argument if that's where you sit in this debate. Trade deals with other countries, and bear in mind, those are countries that are growing much faster than the European Union. The EU, as a share of world trade, is declining through time and will continue to do so. There'll be other countries that are making the waves in the future. Free ports and things like that.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you.
I'll stop there. So, okay.
Appreciate it.
As everybody said, customs is clearly a big thing. We need to get the trading relationship improved. But I think when people voted for Brexit, people didn't vote that our kids couldn't study in Europe. They didn't vote that our musicians couldn't cross the channel and go to venues 80 miles on the other side of the channel and play in venues. They didn't vote for queues at passport and border controls. So I think we can fix a lot of things. I think fixing those things can be the start of a better relationship and a closer relationship with Europe. Like everyone said, we've got to respect the result of the referendum, but not everyone voted for the Brexit we got.
Can I just say I can't see any of you anymore because your camera just fell over. So I'm kind of speaking into the dark. But in my 60 seconds, I would just like to say that thank you. I would just like to say that one of the reasons I'm talking to you from America, I work as road crew on touring concerts, is because it's now easier for me to work in America than it is for me to work in Europe, which is absolutely ridiculous. Thanks to Brexit, it's been an utter disaster for our industry. And I understand that recent figures say that it's resulted in a 5% dent in the UK economy. It's very telling that the leading campaigner candidate, what are they called? Not Revolt, Reform UK, Reform UK, BNP, UKIP, Brexit Party, isn't here tonight. And you would have thought he would be, but the reason he's not here is because he knows he hasn't got a leg to stand on with this question, that he would be absolutely eviscerated if he came and stood in front of these people.
Thank you. Thank you. The last last point from the audience. I hope this isn't a lengthy question because I would like to squeeze one more question in at the end that's been asked before.
Michael, please. I'm Michael Page. I live in Lovely Tracy. I'm 95 and I came because I felt I had a big, important message to give to you, nice young people. You must look at the country first. Consider your country, not the party. But my question is, considering the considerable shambles in the care system, what are the various parties' proposals to tackle this? Because it is at the heart of poverty, the NHS shambles, the immigration saga, and you could go on. I've been doing some research on this, and I won't waste your time on it. I'll hear what the panel have to say to assure us that they will tackle this problem as a national emergency. Yeah. I wrote a signal.
Thank you. I think we have the question. Yeah, I think we have the question. And this would be question 7, so I think it's starting with you, Mel.
Well, thank you so much for your question, sir. Funding social care has been a problem for governments of different colours for a very long time. There's a chap called Andrew Dilmott who produced a lengthy report some time ago, which I think has a solution that probably all parties on this panel can coalesce around. When I was chair of the Treasury Subcommittee, he appeared before my committee, cross-party committee, and largely we did reach consensus. And what it's all about is, if people don't mind to some degree, if they can afford it, funding some of their social care, but they don't want to have to fund it if they've got absolutely nothing, and they don't want to have to fund it if it's cataclysmically large as a bill. So you have to have a system that has a kind of cap and a collar, an £86,000 over your life maximum, which is what Dilmott recommended, and if, for example, your assets are worth less than £20,000, you don't pay anything at all, and there's a kind of sliding scale between them, and the taxpayer then picks up the difference. So it's a kind of interplay between individuals, depending on their circumstances, and the taxpayer. If we could all get together as parties, we could resolve this, in my opinion. The problem is that when any one party is in power and tries to do so, the other one sees some kind of political advantage in undermining the process for political part. And that's not a partisan point, all parties do that. What we've got to do is get together as parties in order to resolve that.
Jill? There are many problems all in one here, but the Green Party wants care for everybody on the same basis as the National Health Service. So free at the point of delivery, which would not use up people's personal resources. So that is a distant aim, but it is an important one, that everybody is entitled to care with dignity and security. There are several things that can lead up to that. One is the erosion of the disability benefits, which would enable people now to be able to provide more of their needs. Another issue is that the poor pay for social care. That is extremely difficult work. How do we evaluate our national success? How do you evaluate the economic value of somebody who is giving care with compassion and skill? So it's important that we count what matters in our national accounts as well. But a proper career path for social care workers would help, as well as adequate pay for them to live in the communities they serve.
Thank you, Mark.
Let's not forget, Mr. Johnson in 2019 promised to fix the care system. It still needs to be fixed. That is why Ed Davey has put care at the very heart of our manifesto. He talks about it constantly because he has lived the life of a carer. He understands the challenges of being a carer and providing care. We need to change the system. The Liberal Democrats are advocating for a cross-party discussion and agreement so that we can form a similar sort of system to the National Health Service That was introduced in 1945. It is now time that we did the same thing for social care. There are other things we would do. We would increase wages for unpaid carers, and we would increase wages for paid carers. We would make it a more attractive job for people to move into and recognise the problems that they face. We would also provide free personal care. But those are kind of short-term fixes. At the heart of it, we want a proper system that all parties can sign up to, that will last for years and years with some grounding and some commitment so that it does not continue to be ignored and misunderstood area. We urgently need change in this, and Ed Davey, you know, he wears his heart on his sleeve about this, and we are pushing very hard to get the reform the country needs.
Bringing Arthur in here.
I pretty much echo everything that the Green Party is saying on this. I'm particularly thinking of like home carers who did not choose to be carers, but were kind of thrust into that. And they need to be recognised as such, and they need to be compensated as such, and they need to be paid well. I can't see that happening under an incoming Labour government who, you know, Wes Streeting has his healthcare vultures circling, and he is willing to feed them. And I don't think that private investment in the National Health Service and in our care service is the way to go. I think we should be judged as a society by how we look after our elderly and our sick, and it shouldn't be done for profit.
Yeah, Arthur's wrong on that, because Labour has, as part of its New Deal for Working People, a workforce plan specifically targeted at social care and to increase pay. And that's a really important objective. Just to use an anecdote, my sister-in-law was a care worker, and she's now moved into nursing simply because of pay. She loved doing care work, but she's moved into nursing because she wanted to go, you know, be a band 6, band 7 nurse because of the pay. We need people like that to stay in the care profession and be leaders. So to improve the care service, we need better people, but we also need a national care service. And it's been alluded to by others. I think there seems to be agreement. We need a care service that is like the NHS, free at point of use, that protects people, gives them dignity in their old age and certainty for their families.
So it's now 9:15. What I intend to do is to read you the last question, but not to ask for it to be answered. The reason I'm going to read it to you is because it's pointed out that it's not much talked about so far during the election, and the question is why not? So I'll simply read it as a question. It's been asked by two people. Climate change. Why allow any more licences to fossil fuel extraction in the UK, given the scientific evidence? Climate scientists and the United Nations are all saying that if we don't act in the next 5 years to drastically reduce our carbon emissions, the world will be heading for catastrophic and irreversible conditions. Heat waves, floods, famines, drought. And yet the climate and ecological emergency has barely been mentioned in this election campaign. Why are politicians not willing to acknowledge the scale and urgency of this problem, which in due course will dwarf our so-called cost of living crisis? So I'll leave that question. So now I'd like to start with Jill and give each of the candidates a 2-minute summing up at the end of the evening. Jill.
If elected, what would I do for Ashburton? It may relieve my fellow candidates to know that I have heard William Hill is offering odds against my being elected of 150 to 1. However, recent experience seems to have made them a little cagey. They may be worried about sudden upsets because the maximum bid you're allowed to put on is £2. I were elected, and if there is a big green vote, and even so that I'm not elected, I think it will boost our policies up the agenda, it will give media attention to those policies, and it will help to hold any future government to account for their promises. Were there to be a Labour government, I hope there'll be a strong Green voice in Parliament which will hold them to account for those things they've promised. We haven't spoken a great deal about climate change, but it's obviously crucial. I would be a strong voice for including securing our future, whether we're thinking about housing, transport, energy, and many other subjects. We haven't much talked about homes, vastly greater finance for communities to manage their own housing through community land trusts would be a big advance, and to manage their homes for local people as they wish. The more broader point is UK is such a centralised society that I would very much favour the devolution of powers and money to levels of government where they are more responsive to the public. I'll finish there, but I hope that you will see that there's a point in having these debates. Thank you for your attendance, and I've been very interested to listen to you.
Since 2010, you, me, and the country have been on a journey. In 2010, the Conservatives, Labour, and the Lib Dems all went into the general election promising to fix the pound in the wake of the 2008 banking crisis. It's become clear, though, that the Conservatives' promise was less about sorting out the economy and more about changing the state's relationship with its people. Rather than seeking fair taxes, they wanted, ironically, low taxes. Rather than a supportive state, they wanted a small state. The brief Truss era was not an aberration, just a logical extension of what they had already put in place. We've travelled a long, dusty, and dare I say it, potholed road. Now we stand at a crossroads. Which road should we choose? A turn to the right, perhaps, with reform. More of the same from the Conservatives. Or Labour, with its promises that mean everyone, according to the IFS, is going to be worse off. Or you could look to those parties that have a different view of the world. The Green Party, with its focus on the environment. Or the Liberal Democrats, who want a caring society, a fair society, an equal society. If, like me, you believe everyone deserves a fair deal, a chance to succeed in life, to raise a family, to own a home, to be fulfilled at work and in life, and to know that the community will rally around if they are ill or struggling, and you want an MP that will work for you, your family, and your neighbours, I would ask you, please, vote for me.
And Arthur on Zoom.
Thank you. There are no winners in here. You're looking at a panel of losers. All of us lose. Everyone in this room is going to lose over the next 5 years somehow. Even if Mel Stride hangs on to his seat, he will definitely lose his job as Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, which should come as some comfort for anyone who works or has a pension. I have had several. I mean, I'm not going to get very far in this election either, because I've had several people writing to me saying that they like what I'm saying, but they're going to vote tactically for Labour to try and unseat Mel. Well, if you, my view is that if you replace Mel with Ollie, you're just replacing one Tory for another Tory. And you need to realise that you own your vote. So in 5 years from now, when no council houses have been built, when the NHS is stuffed full of private profiteers, when people still live in poverty across our constituency, when kids are still dying in the Middle East through arms that have come via the UK, that's on you because you voted for it. Saying that you voted tactically does not excuse you from the blame. And this is why I am standing for election, to give you the opportunity to vote with your conscience. Keir Starmer will be our next Prime Minister for sure. What happens in this constituency is a sideshow. I'm asking you to vote with your conscience on July the 4th, Independence Day. Arthur Price, thank you for coming, and thank you for listening.
So
follow that. Okay. Do you know what I think Arthur hasn't done? I think he hasn't really listened to me, because if he had, he'd know that I'm really not very much like Miles Stride, and really not a Tory. I was a Labour councillor for 11 years, so I think I know something about being in the Labour Party, supporting working people, supporting socialism, and being a representative of a place. So, and from being a representative of a place, the thing I've learned most is the most important thing is to listen. And over the last 6 weeks, I've been listening to a lot of you by email, on the doorstep, at events like this. And the best thing I can do, if I'm elected, is to continue listening to you and taking that message to a new Labour government, because that is the most important thing. Having representation to a Labour government, if there is one, because no votes, well, some votes have been cast, but very few votes have been cast so far in this election, is a really important thing. There's never been a Labour MP for this part of Devon. There's never been a Labour MP representing a rural constituency in Devon. And that needs work. It needs, we need to talk to Keir Starmer, we need to talk to our government to make the case for places like Central Devon to a new Labour government and make sure we get the best deal. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope you will consider voting for me this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to come to Tim's question, actually, that he asked earlier. I think what Tim said was that I've been a good MP, but he wanted to change. And he wanted to change for reasons of honesty in government, etc. And that brings me to what's going to happen, and let me be very honest with you, in this general election. It is absolutely clear from the polls that the Labour Party is heading for a landslide. Not just a Tony Blair level landslide, but probably the greatest landslide since 1931. What therefore matters in this constituency and others is what kind of opposition are you going to have? Who are you going to have going up to Parliament to represent you in the face of that government? And whatever's been promised on this panel tonight, let me tell you one thing. You govern in prose, in opposition, and you campaign in poetry. And the reality is when you get into government, it's very different. And there will be many things in the next Labour government, and we have to accept that there will be a next Labour government, that are going to be very difficult for rural people down here. There's a reason why rural people have generally not had Labour MPs, and that is that they haven't been listened to by that party, but they have by my party. Now, I've gone through some of the things that I've done for our area, Oakhampton and rail and farming and so on and so forth. I've also done a large number of things in Parliament as Financial Secretary to the Treasurer. I understand the way finances work. I chaired the Treasury Select Committee. I was leader of the House of Commons, and I've served in the Cabinet as the Secretary of State for work and pensions. And if I have the opportunity, I will continue to fight for you just as I have done over the last 14 years. But could I just finish with one final comment? And that is, I think this is the last hustings that we're going to have in this election. And I would like to pay tribute to all of us on this panel, all the candidates who have conducted themselves with great decency. There's been no nastiness, there's no been any personal campaigning going on, etc. And we've had a good and full debate. And for that, I thank you, and I thank them as well. Thank you.
So Mel's stolen my final point, which was to thank you. I hadn't written it down because I wasn't sure what kind of an evening I'd have. But I do want to thank you because you have listened and we have heard what our candidates have had to say, and I think that's really, really important. We've also heard about the Great Frost, the world's biggest firework competition, the fact that we're recognised by our teeth in America, and the random acts of kindness of passing on parking tickets.
Yeah.
So I really want to thank all those involved. Thank you, Andy, for preparing the room, and other volunteers within the Arts Centre for getting it all ready for us. Sarah for timekeeping, invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
And I'd like to leave you with what is my favourite question, and it won't be answered by its nature. What's the biggest cover-up you personally have played a role in? So, thank you and good night, and go well. But before that, Andy's looking expectantly as if he might be able to take the floor for 2 minutes. And please, Sarah, will you time Andy?
Not even 2 minutes, just 20 seconds to say that politics is all very well, but this is an art centre and it's for entertainment, and particularly music. We have a fantastic music night tomorrow night with Avant Rock, musicians who've come from Japan, Germany, Belgium, London. Some amazing people are coming to play tomorrow night. We had our piano tuned up a quarter tone so it would match the organ up there. So the organ's coming into play with bass and drums. It's going to be amazing. Come back tomorrow night for that. And we also have our 5th annual International Chamber Music Festival coming up in a few weeks' time. Everything that's been going on has meant that we haven't had a chance to publicise it properly, but it is happening. Tickets are now available. We have some amazing musicians coming to play Ravel, Haydn, Bach, some new music by someone who's related to someone who lives in Ashburton. Fantastic chamber string quartets, a bit of saxophone here and there, house music in 2 amazing places, the Brick House and a lovely thatched cottage in Dartmoor, 5 concerts. Please come, please buy tickets, please tell your friends. There's some amazing stuff coming. Do come back. Thanks you very much.
And that's the longest 20 seconds we've had. And also on Friday, a film chosen for Pride Month, so do come to that too. So thank you all and go well, go home safely.
Oh, cheers.
Yes. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. Cheers, thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks so much for doing it.
Okay, well you need to go down there and see him front right.
Front right.
If anyone can offer a lift to Bryony to Buckfastleigh, please come down to the front right now.
I'll be around in town, I'm sure, over the next week. You can buy me, I think you can buy me a friend centre. Yeah. That would be. Cheers, mate. Yeah, thank you.
campaign and say we can I don't think it's a photo about
My other daughter, No, it's nice to have it. One thing I would say, yeah. It's really nice to see you, that's what I was going to say. No, I did. Oh, Jeanette was asking me back. All right. Okay, hi, Rod. I'm not yet. I haven't even looked in my diary. I don't know what I'm doing. Did you send the other part? Once you've done a few, it's in the back. It's so cute. I haven't even seen that. But you feel like, I think it's a whole problem. Yeah.
Thanks for putting this together, Andy.
That's all right.
There was nothing south of the 830.
Nothing, how do you mean?
No Hustings at all, so we're so relieved.
Oh yeah, Bubby Tracy usually does one, but what happened
no,
there?
well, it went really badly wrong in 2017. Do you remember? They refused
No.
to do one. Don't you remember
Did they?
that one? It was really heated.
Yeah, I was there. They did do one. I was there. They did one every time.
And the vicar got really annoyed and stamped his foot.